The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome everyone to the second webinar in our four-part webinar series this month. Last Thursday's webinar we covered Solar Power 101. If you want a copy of that slide set, just shoot me an email at mike@hotspot.net. Today's webinar is titled Protecting Your Equipment Investment, Installation Practices That Pay Off. So let's go ahead and get started here. So the purpose of this webinar is to introduce you to key concepts in protecting your equipment investment during the installation phases. We will cover four principal areas, including physical, wireless, power, and router configuration aspects. Let's begin by identifying the potential sources of danger to your equipment investment. This list seems big and scary, but by the end of the webinar, hopefully you should have the courage to tackle these issues using our easy-to-follow guidelines. These potential sources include moisture intrusion, corrosion, high EMI, high signal strengths, extreme temperatures, electrical surges, lightning strikes, wind loading, unauthorized router access, data theft, or wireless snooping. So we'll begin with mounting your equipment. Each wireless kit ships with pole mounting hardware for both the router and antennas, and we also have a wall mount adapter option available. We will run through some real-world applications in the following slides that should help you identify which option is best suited for your particular installations. So depending on the structure you're mounting to, you may need to factor in the wind loading forces on the mounting structure itself. This is important if you're leasing space on an existing antenna tower or installing your own. The leaser of the tower space will usually require this information from you before they let you even install on the tower. Often customers are mounting antennas to existing light standards or using non-penetrating roof mounts. While an existing light standard should have no problem with even our largest flat panel antennas when loading, non-penetrating roof mounts are much more susceptible to damage and even failure from high wind speeds. In these circumstances, make sure that you have the adequate weight, or what they call ballast, at the base of the non-penetrating roof mount. Check the manufacturer specs for ballast rate requirements. It's also recommended to use cinder or solid cap concrete blocks for the ballast. Don't use sandbags, as the bag material tends to rot with sun and rain exposure over time. And it's a good idea to also check for corrosion on the supporting crossbars of the pole mount, of the non-penetrating roof pole mount. As we've seen in the past, corrosion can form, which would lead to some antenna swaying and potential failure. Last tip on these types of installations: install the antennas as low as possible on non-penetrating roof mounts, so you reduce the lever action that's created by the antennas on the pole. All right, here's an example of a successful non-penetrating roof mount installation. You can see that they correctly used concrete cinder blocks here, and instead of sandbags. And most of the time, you are you're mounting to existing infrastructure that is present on site. If there's any question to the stability of the object you're mounting to, we suggest you consult an engineer before mounting to it. But a majority of the time, you'll be mounting to oddly sized and oddly shaped objects. The best solution we have found in these cases is to bolt into the object with unistrut framing. The unistrut frame provides you with a mounting point where you can install a piece of Schedule 40 pipe, for example, which you can then mount the camera and the wireless kit. This solution also allows you to articulate the antenna for alignment. So speaking on corrosion and moisture. All right, let's talk about, there are only a few potential points of corrosion and water intrusion into the router. These include the antenna and Ethernet ports and the router body lid. Luckily, our routers are all IP67 rated, so that means that they are dust tight and have a water intrusion survivability of about, or the equivalent of being submerged in 1 meter of water for 30 minutes. The lid is bolted down from the factory with correct tensioning, so do not loosen or tighten those lid bolts. Some of the key features of the ruggedized router enclosure is a dual-channel design of the lid and body, which allows for a specialized rubber compression gasket to be inserted. And this special gasket is infused with metal particles, which help maintain RF isolation of the internal radios and electronics. The enclosure itself is a aluminum extrusion ruggedized enclosure. So to maintain the IP67 rating, here are a few steps to take during the installation process. First, you're going to want to pick up a can of CRC's 2-26 electrical lubricant. This product serves multiple purposes. It will improve the resistance values at points of contact. It will displace moisture and will create a long-lasting protective film against corrosion. You'll want to shoot a couple of sprays of this lubricant on both the male and female sides of every RF port. That would include the RF surge suppressors, the RF pigtails, and the RF ports on the router and the antennas themselves. So once you have applied that electrical lubricant, you can then screw on the RF surge suppressors directly onto the wireless router. Here is another opportunity to protect your equipment. Be mindful not to cross-thread during this process. Cross-threading can lead to poor performance of the wireless links and can even harm the radio modules themselves if you create an intermittent connection. It could also create an air gap in the connector itself, which could lead to moisture intrusion. This step leads us to our first electrical grounding point. So it's absolutely critical that you ground this RF surge suppressor to an earthen ground. That means a 3-foot or longer copper rod driven directly into the soil. An earthen ground is the safest and most effective grounding means. There are other forms of grounding, but consult a local electrician for best practices there. So once you have grounded your RF surge suppressors, you can then screw those on directly to the 2-foot RF pigtail that's provided that will connect the router to the antenna. Again, important not to cross thread here. So after that, you will screw on the RF pigtail directly onto the antenna. The antenna will be grounded through the RF pigtail and the RF surge suppressor, so you don't need to run an alternative ground directly from the antenna. Once you've screwed on all our RF connectors, you'll need to weatherize these connections. This process is a little messy, but it's very imperative that you perform it. Begin by tightly wrapping each of the RF points of connection with a specialized butyl tape. We like to use the name brand Coax seal, which we found works best, and our integrators find that works best. Don't use silicone or rubberized sealants, as they often leak and are much more difficult to remove versus just cutting off a few layers of tape if you need to change around antennas or place the installation at a different location. So using the butyl tape, wrap the RF connector once and make sure to extend that tape 1 inch beyond the metal part of the connector. And then you're going to begin to mold that butyl with your fingers so you get a good seal going. Then you'll want to go over that first layer of butyl with a layer of electrical tape to protect it from the sun. Overlap the electrical tape as you wind it up and around so you create a shingle-like effect that goes with the flow of water. This layer of electrical tape should also extend 1 inch beyond the butyl. If needed, you can repeat the process for added layers of protection in very extreme environments. And here's what it will look like after the weatherization process of the RF ports. Alright, so a bit about router power. When going to power your wireless routers, only use the provided PoE injector that supplies 18 volts DC over Ethernet. We use non-standard PoE power voltage that would be in the range of 11 to 27 volts DC, and we do so for a number of reasons. Major one is that it's much easier and more economical to create 12 volts DC from solar and from mobile applications versus using a 48 volt. Again, remember, if you have a PoE switch available, which a lot of the times you will have a PoE switch to power up multiple cameras per one wireless transmitter. If this is the case, use the provided PoE injector to power our router, of course, but you can plug in on the data port of our Ethernet injector, of our PoE injector, and that will effectively block the high voltage coming from the PoE switch, but will still allow the flow of data between the switch, the cameras, and the wireless transmitter. So next, you will need to install the provided PoE surge suppressor in line between the wireless router and the PoE injector. Make sure to connect that green grounding wire to an earthen ground. If you fail to ground that, the surge suppressor is useless, and you will not protect your wireless router from any power surges. Alright, to weatherize the Ethernet ports, you will need to terminate the end of the Ethernet cable using the provided weatherproofing kit that ships with every wireless unit. And that kit contains all the pieces you will need, including an Ethernet ice cube to terminate with. Some important points to note here: piece number 5 has a beveled edge and should face piece number 6. The two pieces labeled number 1 are rubber gaskets. One is applied to the face of part number 3, while the other is applied to the face of the Ethernet port on the router itself. So these gaskets have a sticky back on them, so just peel off the paper, stick it on both faces. Don't forget these two pieces because they are critical in creating the watertight seal of the connector. Once you have made up the Ethernet cable with the waterproofing assembly, you can screw it directly into the Ethernet port on the router. Again, it's critical that you do not cross-thread here, as it will compromise the waterproofing. We do recommend to use shielded Cat5e or greater cable for both indoor and outdoor applications. It will add another layer of grounding and RF protection. Alright, lastly here, you will want to do the same weatherizing process you did for the Ethernet ports, or that you did on the RF ports for the Ethernet ports. But it's a good idea to wrap the tape in the tightening direction so you don't wind up loosening the connector while you're trying to weatherize it. Again, you're going to use the butyl with the electrical tape in the same fashion we did for the RF ports. Okay, this diagram shows us parts of our wireless kits that are rated outdoor versus those that would be rated indoors. The only parts that are not outdoor rated are the power supply, the PoE injector, and PoE surge suppressor. Typically, you are placing those in the same NEMA box as your power source. So a little bit about temperature hardening. While our products do have great environmental specs, there are many parts of the world that can potentially exceed our operating temperature ranges. Make sure to check the product's data sheet for the operating temperature range, and if you sense that you will come close to these thresholds, talk to one of our pre-sales engineers so they can suggest the proper course of action. Alternatives may include providing an environmentally controlled NEMA enclosure or installing products indoors while routing the antennas outside. Okay, so here is a great example of an installation in a harsh environment. This is the Port of Grays Harbor in Washington State, installed by Site Security 360. This site had every harsh variable imaginable: severe cold, lots of wind, wireless interference from docking ships, frequent rainstorms, and even salt spray. Here's a very similar installation on the opposite side of the United States at the Port of Miami in Florida. Same types of environmental concerns here, however, much higher temps with frequent and severe thunderstorms and even hurricane-force winds. Our routers are designed to perform in exactly these types of environments, so don't hesitate when suggesting a hotspot solution. If you do need to go beyond our operating specs, there are many temperature-controlled NEMA enclosures to house our equipment in. Dotworks has a great temperature-controlled camera enclosure that has room for our wireless MVR products. Here's an example of just that. Caltrans, They used a DotWorks enclosure or camera enclosure to house our micro NVR product in a PTZ camera. Alright, so thus far we've talked about how to protect the physical aspects of our installation. Now let's focus on steps we can take to protect the wireless portion of our projects. Two key concepts here are wireless signal strength and wireless encryption. So we can think of wireless links like a conversation between two people. You don't need to be screaming in the person's ear to get your information through, but you want to be loud enough to be heard over the background noise, but not so loud as to damage the person's eardrums. The same could be true for wireless links. There's parts of the radio that can be damaged if exposed to high wireless signals for extended periods of time. So to prevent this screaming in the ear type of a situation, you can check your wireless registration table using our HS config utility program for these wireless offenders. Here you can see a connected client has a signal strength of -51 over -36. The first number, or the TX value, is the signal strength that the other unit is receiving our signal at. The second value, or the RX, is the strength at which we are receiving the signal at. A good range of values here is between -55 on the high signal strength side to a low of -75. If either of these values are stronger than -55, you'll want to turn down the TX transmission power using HS config software utility. Alright, you could begin by reducing the TX power incrementally, starting at a value of 17 and working your way down until you get those signal strengths in and around -50 to -60 range. We also have this really cool spectral analyzer that's built into every RAP Plus router that you can use to find sources of EMI and other potentially offending signals. So you would want to run the scan from both sides of the wireless link, then take a screen capture of the resulting scans. You can then overlay these images to see where you have high EMI or high signal strengths. You can see here that there are a few signals in the yellow zone or the very high signal strength area. If they are hotspot wireless routers you control, just log into them and use hsconfig utility to turn the transmission power as necessary down to bring them back into the green zone. If you don't have control over these devices creating the offending signal, you may want to adjust the antenna alignment of your receiver to reduce the reception. I would suggest doing this if you have signals in the red zone or the so-called potentially damaging signal strength range. So protecting your wireless investment also means protecting the data that's being transmitted over it. Luckily, all hotspot routers come factory pre-configured using 128-bit WPA2 wireless encryption. This will protect not only the data from theft, but also from wireless snoopers. It's also a good idea to turn off your SSID broadcasting to add yet another layer of wireless security. We also recommend to use unique SSIDs for each wireless base station you have. You can use the scan tool in hsconfig to find the SSIDs of other wireless access points in the area and then configure around those as according. There are also a couple of configuration changes that will help lock down your router and protect it from a network point of view. For obvious reasons, you will want to change the default username and password used to log into the routers. You can do so by, again, using hsconfig utility. Log in, click on System from the left-hand main menu side, and then click on Passwords. You will then be prompted to change the password. Finally, you could stop certain IP services that are not being used or that you will not use in the future, such as FTP, SSH, Telnet, or the integrated web server. But make sure that you have either the Winbox or www service on so you can have access through hsconfig or through the web browser interface. All right, so we'll go ahead and open that up to Q&A. This one was a short and sweet one, so let's go ahead and open up to Q&A, and meanwhile I will start a poll here. And the Q&A can be asked in the questions section on your right hand for the WebEx utility. A couple people are still voting here. Brian says, nice photo. Yep. Thank you for sending us to that photo there. Site Security 360. You guys take some great pics. All right, we'll go ahead and close that. Go ahead and answer or start asking questions in the questions section. You should be able to access both the poll and the questions. Now again, this is the second webinar in a series, so we will have one next Thursday and the following Thursday after that. So stay tuned for those. And again, this is a great opportunity to start asking questions or suggestions to add more information if needed. We use these to serve you better. All right, we got a question here. Can you review the first number and second number of the signal strengths again, please? Sure thing. So the first value would be the TX value. So as you're reading it from the radio you're logged into, that's going to be what the far end radio is saying it's receiving us at, right? So we're transmitting to, radio X at this signal strength. Let me go back on the slide set here that will help to illustrate. Let me go ahead and close that poll. You should still be able to see my screen. Let's look for that slide here for TX power. We're down towards the bottom here. All right, so this value, the TX value, again, is what this particular radio, so we're logged into, let's say, the base station, and this is a transmitter out there transmitting some cameras. He's saying, the transmitter is saying, he hears us at neg 51, which is a great signal strength on the higher side. And then we are saying we hear him at neg 36. So essentially, we need this guy out there to turn down his TX power. Thank you for the question, Raymond. This webinar will be available for people later. Will this webinar be available for others, installers? Yes, it will. And it will be available in audio commentary form. We have recorded this one, thankfully. All right, let me see. Let me go ahead and close that last poll. Or that one's already closed. And last poll here. Again, keep the questions coming in. Questions show me that either I did a good job and we covered everything you needed to know, or we need to answer some more questions. All right, about half of you voted on that poll here. Thanks for voting, guys. Keep those questions coming in so far. All right, we got a new question here. What is the best grounding method recommended? All right, so we'll go back up to the grounding part. If I could find it here, there we are. So again, you're going to want to ground. The best grounding method is essentially a 3-foot or longer copper rod driven directly into the soil. That's going to be your most effective. Sometimes strap banding is going to dissipate the electrical a bit more, but generally, if you can get to direct ground into the soil, that's going to be your best method. All right, thank you for the praise there. I'm going to go ahead and close this last poll. And we'll give it a few more minutes. If nobody has any questions, we'll wrap it up in about 5 minutes or 3 minutes. Thanks for attending, everybody. We'll give it a couple more minutes here for any questions that you have. We still got about 21 people on. My name is Mike Barron, Director of Technical Sales here. Feel free to give me a call or an email. Our phone number here is 805-484-0085. Or actually, that's my cell phone number. You can call us at 805-541-9477, extension 6003. All right, guys, one more minute here, and we'll wrap it up. If there's any specific topic you would like to hear from us in the future, you could also write it down in either the chat or this question here. We'd like to hear from you guys. It's all about you, what your needs are. Go ahead and write any of that. We got a new question here. Why does the ear screaming issue exist? So we had an analogy about a conversation between humans versus a conversation between two wireless nodes. In the wireless radios, there's cavity filters and amplifiers in the front, what they call the front end of the radio. Those can be damaged by high signal strengths. Essentially, they'd be stressed out by the amount of energy that's coming into them. So using that analogy just really helps drive home the point that there is that potential, and that we use the tools provided to find if you're in that type of scenario, the quote-unquote screaming in the ear scenario, right? So we're looking for those signal strength values. Again, we'll go back to that slide. Let's see here. So we are looking for, either the SNR, which is your signal-to-noise ratio, essentially, what a receiver is hearing a certain signal versus the background noise. A good SNR is between 25 to negative 45, or excuse me, 25 to 45. Those are positive numbers, versus the signal strength numbers, which are a negative number here that we see. Again, the range that you want to see on the signal strength side, neg 60 over neg 60 is about perfect. If you go neg 50 or neg 40, it's on the high side. Low side would be neg 75 to neg 80, neg 90, etc. All right, guys, we'll give it one more minute since we have some occasional questions coming in, and then we'll wrap it up. Thanks for answering all the polls. The polls are all closed. That's the last in the poll questionnaire. All right, guys. This will be available as I did press start on the recording button, thankfully. We are also going to re-record the first webinar, the Solar Powering 101. So we'll have that, both of these available for you in PDF and playable format in a Windows format. Thanks for attending, guys. Stay tuned next week, Thursday, same time. We will be discussing, I think we're going to be discussing mobile type solutions. So look out for that one. You have an invite in your email already. All right, guys. Thanks for attending.